private academy cafeteria fell unusually quiet when Daniel Reyes walked in with his daughter. Most parents at Crestmont International arrived in tailored suits and polished shoes. Daniel wore a simple button-down and jeans that had seen too many early mornings. His daughter Sophia clutched her lunch tray carefully, her scholarship badge pinned proudly to her blazer. They had been invited to the annual Parents and Mentors Luncheon, a networking tradition where wealth often spoke louder than achievement. Daniel scanned the room for empty seats, just not at the tables that mattered. Sophia spotted a half-empty table near the center, surrounded by students laughing loudly. At the head sat Ariana Beaumont, the Billionaire founder's daughter. Ariana's designer bag rested on the chair beside her like a silent barrier. "Dad, there's space there," Sophia whispered. Daniel nodded gently. "Let's ask first." They approached the table politely. Conversation softened as eyes flicked toward Daniel's worn shoes, then toward Sophia's scholarship pin. "Excuse me," Daniel said calmly. "Is the seat taken?" Ariana looked him up and down slowly. Then she smiled, but it wasn't kind. "I'm sorry," she said sweetly. "This table is for parents." A few students snickered. Daniel paused, confused. "I am her father." Ariana tilted her head slightly. "Oh, I just assumed." She let the sentence hang unfinished, the implication louder than any insult. Sophia's cheeks burned red. "It's fine," Daniel said quietly, already turning away. He had seen that look before. It's the one that measured worth by appearance alone. But as they stepped toward a small corner table near the exit, Ariana's voice carried across the room. "You can't sit here," she called again lightly. "This event is about global leadership. Some conversations might be complicated." More laughter. Sophia froze. Daniel stopped walking. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned slowly. He met Ariana's gaze, not angry, not embarrassed, just steady, complicated. He repeated gently. The cafeteria quieted again. Daniel walked back toward the center table, pulling out the chair Ariana had blocked with her designer bag. He didn't sit yet. Instead, he looked at the student beside her and spoke in fluent French. "Je m'excuse, si nous dérangeons. Afia voulait, simplement CSCR, ICO. I apologize if we're disturbing you. My daughter simply wanted to sit here." The boy's eyes widened. Daniel then shifted smoothly into Mandarin, addressing another parent across the table. "When you are feichan nu li, cai jin ru jie suo xie xiao." My daughter worked very hard to earn her place here. Forks lowered. Whispers stopped. Ariana's confident smile faltered. "At." Without raising his voice, Daniel continued Spanish, then German, then Arabic, each sentence clear, precise, effortless. 7 languages flowed one after another, not rehearsed, not dramatic, natural. By the time he returned to English, the entire cafeteria was silent. "I believe," he said calmly, finally pulling out the chair and sitting beside Sophia. "We'll be just fine discussing global leadership." No one laughed. And for the first time that afternoon, Ariana Beaumont didn't know what to say. The silence that followed felt heavier than any applause. Ariana's fingers tightened, slightly around her glass of sparkling water. The confidence that had fueled her earlier comment drained from her expression. Around the table, parents who had been half-listening moments before now leaned forward with genuine curiosity. Sophia stared at her father, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Dad," she whispered under her breath. She had known he spoke Spanish fluently. She had heard him use bits of French before. But 7 languages? Effortlessly? Daniel gave her a small, reassuring smile, as if nothing unusual had just happened. Across the table, a venture capitalist cleared his throat. "That was impressive," he admitted. "Where did you study?" Daniel folded his hands calmly on the table. "I didn't," he replied, "not formally." The confusion deepened. "I worked overseas for years," he explained. "Construction projects, shipping logistics, translation contracts. When you work in different countries long enough, you learn to listen before you speak." The phrasing landed deliberately. Ariana shifted in her seat. The headmaster, who had been circulating between tables, had stopped walking entirely. He now stood a few feet away, clearly intrigued by the unexpected turn of events. "And what do you do now?" Mr. One parent asked politely. Reyes, Daniel answered. I run a small community consulting firm. It's mostly helping immigrant families navigate paperwork and business licensing. He shrugged lightly. Nothing glamorous. But the room no longer saw him as nothing. Ariana forced a laugh, attempting to regain control of the moment. Well, she said lightly, that's certainly diverse. The edge was gone from her tone. In its place lingered discomfort. Sophia noticed, and for the first time since enrolling at Crestmont International, she didn't feel smaller at this table. The billionaire founder himself, Victor Beaumont, entered the cafeteria moments later, his presence commanding immediate attention. Conversations resumed cautiously as he greeted board members and donors. Eventually, his gaze landed on the unusually quiet center table. He approached. Everything all right here? He asked smoothly. No one spoke at first. Then the venture capitalist chuckled. More than all right, he said. We were just discussing global leadership. Mr. Reyes gave us quite the demonstration. Victor's eyebrow lifted slightly. That's so? Daniel stood respectfully, but did not bow or overextend. Pleasure to meet you, sir. Victor studied him carefully. Have we met before? Not personally, Daniel replied calmly. Ariana avoided eye contact entirely. Victor sensed the shift in atmosphere instantly. Years of running a billion-dollar empire had trained him to read rooms faster than spreadsheets. What did I miss? He asked lightly. The headmaster stepped forward with a faint smile. A reminder, he said, that leadership isn't always dressed in expectation. Victor glanced at his daughter, then back at Daniel. And something unspoken passed between them, because influence can be inherited, but respect must be earned. And at that table, in front of the entire academy, Daniel Reyes had just earned it. Victor Beaumont didn't sit immediately. Instead, he looked at his daughter. Ariana, he said calmly, though the weight in his voice was unmistakable, would you like to explain what happened? The cafeteria felt like it had shrunk around the table. Ariana hesitated. She wasn't used to being questioned publicly, especially not by her father. It was just a misunderstanding, she replied quickly. I didn't realize that he was Sophia's father. Victor finished gently. Her silence answered for her. Daniel shifted slightly. It's not necessary, he said evenly. Children say things they don't always understand. I understood, Ariana muttered under her breath, though the edge had faded into embarrassment. Victor's gaze remained steady on her. Then that's more concerning. Around the room, conversations had stopped again. No one pretended to eat now. Sophia stared at her tray, wishing she could disappear, and yet feeling strangely proud at the same time. Her father hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't insulted anyone. He had simply spoken, and the room had changed. Victor turned back to Daniel. 7 languages? He asked, genuinely curious now. Daniel nodded once. 7 spoken fluently. A few more conversationally, and you're running a small consulting firm? Victor pressed. For now, Daniel replied. There was no bitterness in his voice. It's just fact. Victor pulled out the chair beside Daniel and sat down, an act that didn't go unnoticed. Billionaire founders did not usually relocate themselves. Mid-event, I built Beaumont Global by understanding markets, Victor said thoughtfully. But markets are people, cultures, context. He leaned back slightly. You seem to understand that better than most executives I've hired. Daniel gave a modest shrug. I understand listening. The statement hung in the air. Across the table, Ariana's discomfort deepened, and not because Daniel had embarrassed her, but because he hadn't. His restraint magnified her behavior more than anger ever could. Victor's voice softened, but it carried authority. Ariana, he said without looking at her, global leadership begins with humility. She swallowed. She began, then stopped. Her eyes flickered toward Sophia. The scholarship badge, the steady posture, the quiet dignity she had. Overlooked, I'm sorry, Ariana said finally. Not forced, not sarcastic, just honest. Sophia blinked, surprised. Daniel nodded politely. Apology accepted. The tension that had gripped the cafeteria loosened. replaced with something else: respect, maybe even admiration. Victor stood slowly. "Mr. Reyes," he said, extending his hand, "would you be willing to visit my office next week? I believe we have more to discuss." Daniel met his handshake firmly. "I'd be open to that." As Victor walked away, murmurs followed, not mocking this time, but impressed. Sophia leaned toward her father. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Because the loudest way to win," he said quietly, "is often the calmest." And across the cafeteria, Ariana Beaumont sat very still, because for the first time in her life, someone had shown her what power without arrogance looked like. The following week, Daniel stepped into the top floor of Beaumont Global, not as a job applicant, but as a guest. The glass-walled office overlooked half the city, a view designed to remind visitors exactly who held power. But Daniel didn't seem intimidated. He took in the skyline calmly, hands folded loosely in front of him. Victor Beaumont stood by the window. "Most people walk in here trying to impress me," he said without turning around. "You're the first who didn't try at all." Daniel gave a faint smile. Pressing someone isn't the same as adding value. Victor finally turned, studying him again. "My daughter was wrong," he said directly. "But she learned something that day. So did I." Daniel remained silent, letting him continue. "You speak 7 languages. You've worked across cultures. You understand negotiation at a human level." Victor paused. "Why stay small?" Daniel's expression shifted slightly. "Because growth costs time, and time is something I owe my daughter first." Victor nodded slowly, respecting the answer. "What if," Victor said carefully, "you didn't have to choose?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I want you to lead our global community partnerships division," Victor continued. "Flexible structure, remote options. Build bridges where we've failed to connect. Teach my executives what listening actually means." Daniel considered the offer carefully. Not dazzled, not overwhelmed, just thoughtful. "If I say no?" he asked calmly. Victor smiled faintly. "Then I'll still respect you. I'll accept. On one condition." Victor looked amused. "You're negotiating already?" Daniel met his gaze steadily. "Scholarship expansion. More seats for students like Sophia. Talent isn't tied to income." Victor didn't hesitate. "Done." That afternoon, the announcement went public. Staff buzzed with curiosity. Investors were intrigued. Media headlines praised the unexpected appointment. But inside Crestmont Academy, the real impact was quieter. Ariana found Sophia in the library days later. "I've been thinking," Ariana admitted awkwardly. "About what your dad said." Sophia looked up from her book. "He didn't try to embarrass me," Ariana continued. "He could have." Sophia smiled slightly. "He doesn't do that." Ariana hesitated, then extended her hand. "Maybe we could start over?" Sophia shook it. And for the first time, it wasn't charity. It was equality. Months later, Beaumont Global expanded into new international markets with fewer cultural missteps and stronger community trust. Employee engagement rose. Partnerships flourished. Victor once told a board member, "The best hire I ever made was the one my daughter almost turned away." At Crestmont's next luncheon, Daniel and Sophia walked into the cafeteria again. This time, no one questioned where they would sit, because respect had already saved them a seat. Sometimes the person told, "You can't sit here," is the one who ends up redefining the entire table.